Greetings, Napanee United Methodist Church family. I love a good book. And I love reading with my kids and getting to remember books from my childhood and discover new books that they love now. Like with Annie, I get to read the picture books, the Green Eggs and Ham from, my childhood and new classics like Pete the Cat that are more recent. Then with Asher, he loves all these Humphrey books that are pretty popular right now. But I'm also developing a love of some of the old ones, like Farmer Boy by Laura Ingalls Wilder with Asher. So that's kind of fun. Alton will read anything he can get his hands on and has gone through all the Chronicles of Narnia, which I love. But we're getting to read brand new books like The Ichabod, which is so much fun. Good books are just amazing. They take you on a journey, and it's so much fun. And when we need to find something new, we head off to our local library and find something that none of us have gotten to read before. And that's an exciting journey too. But the most important book in that library, and the most important book in any library, is this one right here, the Bible. Let's talk about that. So what if I told you that this isn't a book? It's actually an entire library. Let's look at it. So this library can be broken into two parts. There's an Old Testament and a New Testament. The Old Testament is everything that happened before Jesus, and the New Testament is Jesus and beyond. The Old Testament has 39 books in it, and they get broken down into categories even further. There's the law, the history, wisdom, and the prophets. The books of the law include Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. You know a lot of the stories from Genesis and Exodus. Genesis includes things like creation and Noah and his ark, and it starts the story of Abraham that we'll get to in a couple weeks. Exodus is the story of Moses and the Israelite people leaving Egypt. Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy contain all the laws that God gave his people to follow. Then we move into the books of history. Some recognizable ones there. You've heard the story of Ruth and Naomi and how Ruth left her people to be with her mother-in-law Naomi. 1st and 2nd Samuel, that talks a lot about David and his family and how he became king and how they started having kings. 1st and 2nd Kings continue talking about the succession of kings and how all those kings came to power and which kings were good and which kings were not so good. And it continues from there. Then we get into the books of wisdom, and you've got Job. Well, this is where some of the things get a little funny. Job isn't somebody who happened after Esther. He actually would have been a contemporary of Abraham and those kind of people, that he was around in the time of Genesis. Psalms, well, that's the hymnal of the Bible, and all those songs, not all of them, a lot of those songs were written by David, which would have been around in here. The Proverbs, a lot of those were written by his son Solomon. So just because you find the books in this order doesn't mean that they were written in that order or that they go chronologically in that order. They don't happen in that order. That's just how people have organized them. Just like you'll find things organized in a real library. So then we move into the prophets. Now the prophets oftentimes were contemporaries of the kings. They were the people that took God's messages to the kings. So these people could all get interspersed, in 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, and 1st and 2nd Chronicles. The prophets get broken down into major and minor prophets, and for the longest time, I had no idea what that meant. I thought these guys were the important ones, and these guys not so much. That's not what it is. These books are just longer. So these are the major prophets, because their books are longer than these guys over here. Tons of interesting stories in here, like you would recognize Jonah and the whales over here. Daniel and the lion's den's over here. A lot of good stuff in the prophets. So then we get to move to the New Testament. The New Testament also gets broken down into some categories. The New Testament has 27 books that get broken down into categories, and they include the Gospels, history, the epistles, and prophecy. The Gospels are those first 4 books of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that they tell the story of Jesus. They tell about Jesus' birth. They tell about his death. They tell about his ministry. In between, they tell about the resurrection. Important books. You move from those into the history. And there's just the one book of history there. It's called Acts of the Apostles. And it's how the church began. And it was actually written by Luke, the same guy who wrote the book of Luke. Then you move over into the epistles. And the epistles can get broken down again. The epistle is a fancy word for letter. And these are the letters that were written by different leaders in the Christian church. And they get broken down into the Pauline letters, so all the letters that were written by Paul, and then other letters that often have their writer as the name of it, like Peter and John, and the Hebrews was a letter that was to the Hebrews. But those letters get broken down that way. Then there is one book of prophecy in the New Testament, and that is the book of Revelation that tells us all about, in very confusing ways, how Jesus is going to come again. And that will be amazing. So, that is how your Bible is not just a book, it's an entire library. And now maybe you know a little bit more about how to find what you're wanting to find when you go to pick it up. So, until next time, see ya.